All right, let's go to this B tier, which is the upset potential. So we kind of had this as they will make the second round probably.
So these are the teams where I don't necessarily expect them to be like a top 3 or 4 seed, but I could see them in like a second round matchup upsetting an upper seed just because they have like an interesting formula for say a playoff series or like a really good player. What's the first team that you have here?
Well, I only have two teams in this tier. This is
Oh,
so I
interesting. Okay.
have Grizzlies.
Okay. I'm expecting a Jaw revenge season. Like we saw him come back for what was it, 4 games after he'd missed the 25 with his suspension and he was like electric. He made the Grizzlies offense work and it's one of those things where I was previously grouping the Grizzlies with teams like the Cavs and the Pelicans where I'm like their stars don't quite fit offensively. They're more defensively oriented teams. But after seeing the difference in the Grizzlies with and without Ja, it made me realize that the real like issue with the Grizzlies offense are like the Ja off minutes. But when he's on, he actually does a good job of making pieces fit that wouldn't otherwise fit because he is such a good playmaker. Not that they're not going to be a top offense because they don't have like a lot of shooting. They're not like a, that kind of like high volume team. They create buckets in, very like conventional ways actually with the high volume of like pick and roll that Jaw plays, but it's enough that it makes sense. And then they have an excellent defense. With the like Jaw's really the only negative defensive player on that team, and even he can make plays, right? Like he can, get some steals off ball. He's got a ridiculous vertical. He can block some shots, all of that stuff. And I think they're just really, really good at the things that they do. And they mostly stick to that when they're playing at their best, right? That's the other
Yeah.
thing is like you see teams that like don't have a defined identity. I think the thing that separates the Grizzlies from a team like the Cavs or the Pelicans, which we'll get to, is that they have their defined identity. Everyone knows their roles. We saw last year without Jaw, obviously, some guys had to step into greater roles, but now they're going to get to, pare that back. And even in those few games after Jaw came back, you saw everybody was like, "Oh, thank God, I can go back to being my catch and shoot self, or I can go back to being this 3-and-D guy instead of doing all this creation." There was no like awkwardness there. So that I think is the difference between them and some of these other teams. I could actually see them as being a team that does because they're so good. I could see them as being one of the teams that does get a higher seed, and then because of that, like they end up like getting to play some weaker teams and then making the conference finals anyway. But I also think they have the potential if they're not one of like the top 3 or 4 seeds to upset one of those upper seeds.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and it would be an upset because I do think that in the West, maybe all but the Mavs, like the Northwest Division teams that we have in A tier, are all definitively better than the Grizzlies. The Mavs are a little bit closer, I think, if we were like parsing it. But I think there's always like there's some margin for error there.
If I was in the West as an NBA player, it was a luxury last season to not have to worry about them. And now they're back and you're gonna be like, God,
Mm.
now I have to like scheme for this team too. And it's just another team. Desmond Bain is so good. Like people are gonna remember him now that they have their people back. I could see them being the Mavs of last season, being the like, yeah, team that kind of surprises people. Not that they're gonna make like a big midseason trade, although maybe they
Yeah.
could, but
They don't really do that. They're like
yeah,
a more stand pat, stick
right.
with your guys kind of team
They've just
mid-season
had
anyway.
really bad injury luck and other luck, bad luck.
Right. We talked about at the
So
top of the show that Gigi Jackson just got injured. Hopefully that's it for this season,
yeah,
right? For their sake. I'm sure like if Grizzlies fans, you need to be praying to the basketball gods and trying to atone for whatever it is that your team did to upset them to
hmm
this degree.
yeah. As a basketball fan and NBA fan, definitely should have Grizzlies on your radar. They could go to the finals. Anything can happen in
Yeah.
this weird league. They got that young Zach Edey. Is it going to be a Derek Lively type story? We'll see.
That was it for B tier. Not a lot, but there's upset potential.
Let's go with the Clippers.
Okay, so they were actually the first one I had listed, but I wanted to transition using the Heat. That's good.
So the Clippers I have in C.
Tell us why
I
they suck.
we talked about their offseason, how it was one of the worst ones. I think they have to have a down year now. They don't have PG. Your team's better with PG for the most part, at least in this stage of his career. If your team isn't a total shit show outside of that. With Kawhi and him and what they were trying to do, and T. Lue and a front office and owner that's willing to go all in, they were put as favorites so many times.
They were the 1 seed at some point in the middle of the season, right?
Really hot stretch.
They had
Everyone was super high
finally
on them.
It's actually funny because I think that the moment that Russ went down, like, it was kind of post All-Star break, maybe a little bit before the All-Star break, like, that's when they started tailing off. 'Cause he brought so much energy to that team. They're not an unathletic team, but their most athletic guys aren't exactly spring chickens,
Yeah.
and they were just so sluggish. It was that they had the Grammy trip, right? Because when the Grammys are happening, they go on the longest road trip in the NBA because they can't use their building. So that trip is just there. And at the end of that trip, they won this like stupid back-to-back game against the Hawks. That was like, if you win this, like you really, it was just clear they just used all of their energy there. And then after that, they just had nothing left. And then obviously Kawhi gets like injured or has some mysterious knee soreness at the end of the season. So then you take that out of the lineup as well. It was just, but when they were good, they were as good as any team in the NBA, Boston Celtics included. They blew out the Celtics at one point in that stretch. So can I give you my case for why I think the Clippers will make the playoffs?
Okay. Yeah.
They have James Harden.
Mm-hmm.
But when he's played, I think ever since he started starting games, his team makes the playoffs every year. He plays a lot of regular season games. He runs a lot of pick and roll. They have a good offense. And then they've got some good defensive pieces on that team, right? So it's like, even if Kawhi misses time, they're still going to be playing coherent enough basketball to be winning, to not be like losing it like every game kind of thing if Kawhi misses time. And if Kawhi is healthy, like they could still be like good enough, like, and they have, again, Chris Dunn. They have Zubac, who we talked about at the top of the show, who's been really great for them. He's playing lots of minutes now because Harden's on the team and using him in the offense, and Ty Lue has less excuses to go small. They did lose Mason Plumlee as a backup center and Daniel Tice, who went to the Pelicans. I actually don't know who their backup center is going to be now that I think of it. But I think they just have a solid enough team to win a good number of regular season games, which might not be enough in today's West to make the playoffs outright. But this tier, I also have teams that I'm like, they could make it out of the play-in.
Well, it's like you got teams in the play-in who are the 7-8, and then you have the 9-10. And so I think I was seeing D as more 9-10 teams. And
you think the Clippers are going to be a 9-10 team?
No, I don't. That's what I'm saying is that's why I didn't put them in D. The next team I had was the Lakers in C.
I had the Lakers in D tier.
I thought about that too.
But I also had them as, I noted that they're the best team in the D tier. So maybe this is the hater tax.
I don't know. I think they'll make a trade around the deadline of some kind. And it may not work and they may be worse because of it. But I just know LeBron, and I know that he knows that the team's not good enough. And I'm like, he's not going to go the whole season with just like nothing happening.
That happened last year.
But
and they knew they weren't good enough
playoffs
last year, too.
They did get to the playoffs, though.
Through the play-in for the second year in a row.
Yeah, but they were the 7 seed.
They were the 8 seed.
No, because we played them in the first round.
Because they beat the Pelicans in the play-in, so they would. So like, if there was no play-in,
I know, but they ended as the 7, which is what I care about.
Sure, but
that's
okay,
what
fine,
I care about.
Fine.
And I was just saying, C is kind of like the 7-8 range, and 9-10 is more the D. And
that's
I think
fair.
80 was looking pretty good, and I believe he's going to have a good season.
You make a good point, and I do think that they're going to win probably a similar number of games as they won last year, but I don't think they're going to win more. Because AD and LeBron played a lot last season relative to their last few years, particularly AD. LeBron made, was it third team All-NBA? And they still ended up a play-in team for the second consecutive year. So you say he was amazing in the Olympics. I thought he was pretty good last year, too. It was just about that consistent effort, and he just doesn't have it on a night-to-night basis anymore.
Yeah.
And the same for AD, despite him not having quite the same age excuse. The reason I would downgrade them relative to last season, even if I think they'll perform similarly, is that we now have, assuming health, the Memphis Grizzlies bumping everybody that was lower than them down, because I don't see the other teams as improving substantially. The Clippers had a lot more like room to be bumped down. Even if they lost PG, they did get worse, but they do still have Harden. They have those like things that you get boxes checked off for like this will be a good enough regular season team. The Lakers don't have that.
Right.
Austin Reeves, we saw a massive regression from him in the regular season compared to his previous year because he was given a bigger role. D'Angelo Russell is D'Angelo Russell. He's actually pretty good in the regular season most of the time, but he was a lot more inconsistent last year. And another summer of people talking about him. And they have all these players that are on the roster that accepted their player options and they couldn't trade them, so they didn't. And now it's like, are these guys going to play? Is Christian Wood going to play? Is Cam Reddish going to play? These guys were like integral parts of their rotation last year. How is JJ Redick going to do as a first-time head coach? Like, a large part of the job of a head coach is just like managing the regular season, and he's literally never had to do that before. So I think they have a lot more downside. So that's the only reason that I would put a team that otherwise, like, I agree with you. Like, I could see them eking their way into that 7-8 range in the play-in, but I could also see them being worse than they were last year, and they have no room to fall.
I think it depends on if they find some way to make some kind of roster improvement, because if they keep it the same, they're going to definitely be pushed down. I don't know that they will because their GM is an idiot. So, okay, I think I agree based on your points that it's deep D because they did have such a bad offseason. Like, it was terrible. And with like the Grizzlies getting better, that is a very good point. And I even think the Rockets are going to be better too. So I think they'll be pushed down even more.
That's true, right?
Yeah,
if they're better. The Rockets might end up being around what they were, but
right.
You know, we'll talk about them.
Let's go to the Rockets then, because I put them in C.
Oh, okay. Oh,
because I just think they're going
to be like the bad guy again.
Hey, I believe in the Rockets. They're gonna, although I know there's like this weird stuff with Şengün going on, and I don't know what's actually going on behind the scenes. But
you know what? The Warriors would kill to have Şengün right now.
For sure. I guess just because they kicked our ass last season, I feel like high on them, and they just need to like kind of get their shit together.
They were great at home, right? They were like a top 4 home team in the West last year. On the road, they were downright atrocious. They were like Utah Jazz level on the road. Worse than the Grizzlies on the road, but better than the Jazz. But again, a young team that showed them like massive improvement, but showed the hallmarks of like, okay, they're still a young team. There's still like some things they need to learn. They have a swap with OKC, and they're definitely gonna be having to give that up. So it's top 10 protected, it looks like. So actually, if they're like, we're not going to be good enough to make the playoffs this year or play in, they could tank.
You're right.
To try to get that top 10.
So is that really a purgatory thing, or is that like they got a plan?
It is a plan. I hate that we call this purgatory now because they're too young. They're the youngest team that I would have in the purgatory tier.
So to be fair, on our show notes for you listeners,
yeah,
we didn't say it was purgatory. We said it was more like a play-in. They make the playoffs if they're lucky, which is like the lower play-in teams who they win those play-in games and they get in.
Yeah.
Is that what the Rockets are?
I think that's what they are because I don't necessarily expect them to be a top 8 team.
We'll put them down there with the caveat that they're not in total purgatory, but
yeah, they're definitely not. They have so many options ahead of them, but they're like of the caliber of the purgatory teams.
It's the possibility that they will tank is what's convincing you right now.
Yeah. That's why I was like, wait, I have to make this last argument because So I got you to move another team down. I see that you have the Phoenix Suns in D tier, but I have them in C tier.
Whoa.
Is that right? You have the Phoenix Suns
I have the Suns in D.
You have the Suns in D tier. Okay. I want to make the C tier case for them because I don't want to be the bad guy, even though I hate the Phoenix Suns. They got swept in round 1 by the Minnesota Timberwolves, who are a substantially better team than them, regardless of the matchup advantages that I think the Phoenix Suns could have had in that series. They did not take advantage of those advantages. Forget that it was the Wolves. Phoenix had no ability to impose their matchup advantage at any point in that series. Like, they had no idea what they were doing. They didn't have a floor general. Nobody looked like they knew what they were doing, really, on both ends of the floor. They didn't know which things they were going to be targeting against the Wolves, whether they were trying to target anything on defense. Every time they did something that worked, they didn't go back to it. It was really annoying. I can't imagine being a fan of that team, like, truly. Now that they have Mike Budenholzer, who is not an offensively oriented coach himself, his teams have not been like super top offenses or anything with the Milwaukee Bucks, but they've been good enough. and they've had decent shot profiles. The Phoenix Suns were actually a terrible shot profile team. They took so many mid ranges, so few threes, so few rim attempts. Like, it wasn't that they at least took some rim attempts or like took a lot of threes along with the middies. It was just like, no, it's just middies. And they turned the ball over a ton. Now that they have Bud, now that they have a point guard, they're going to add, I think, some organization to an offense that already has a bunch of really talented jump shooters. So they'll have a higher floor offensively, and they can continue to, like, raise the ceiling from there just because those guys are so talented. And then obviously having like Tyus Jones or Monte Morris are going to help reduce turnovers. But like, what is your argument for having them in D tier?
Okay, so when we first started doing this, just a quick little side, I put the Suns in the A tier, which is the which is the contenders, like, or like the conference finals or bust.
Yeah.
Because I do think that that's what the Suns think. Like,
Right. The
HBO was like,
expectation.
everyone wants our roster. We got KD, we got Booker. They went
They
all in.
also they said that everyone wants their roster, but they also said that they were not planning on adding a point guard and taking the ball out of Book or KD's hands, and they added point
A lot.
guards. They added 3 point guards actually between the
yeah.
standard contracts and the two ways.
I'm on the fence with Bud just because he was about to be fired if they didn't win the championship. He was like literally on the hot seat and was criticized a lot. I think some of that was overblown. I think he's a fine coach.
Well, he did get fired.
Eventually, yes. He's going to be better than Vogel was. So I think that's like an upgrade. I finally figured out why I'm so low on Tyus Jones. Because this was the shot chart in the series versus the Golden State Warriors the year that they won. When the last time the Warriors won the championship, this was Tyus Jones' shot chart in the series.
That's amazing.
And I remember watching this series and fucking being pissed at Tyus Jones because I was
because you hated the Warriors.
I was like, please beat the Warriors, please. And and everyone was like, he's the best backup point guard in the league this season. And I was like, he's doing terrible in this series. I don't remember the context necessarily as why he was so bad and couldn't make a literal shot, but I went and looked at his stats from the series and he was like minus 14 every game. But he had some games where he had like 9 rebounds and 8 assists and 7 points, which is like pretty good. That's what you want, like some assists and some rebounds. But like, my God, he could not shoot it. And I just don't believe in him. I'm pissed at him for this. It doesn't move me at all that they have him.
That I can use that to spin it in the Suns' favor. Because if Tyus ends up being that bad, then they'll stop starting him. And then they won't be as tiny as they've chosen to make themselves this season.
I mean, is that like the big debate going on, is whether they start him or if he comes off the bench or something? Oh, yeah, because he was like, I'm supposed to be a starter.
Apparently, Budenholzer promised him a starting job.
Right.
And that's how they got him to sign there on a minimum.
I think that's going to be
Why
a
else
mistake.
would he go to Phoenix?
Man, I just don't like the Suns. I think their defense is awful. I think Monte is on the end of his career.
A lot of Nuggets Twitter with that one.
There's a reason we traded him, okay? And it worked out very well.
That's getting clipped.
I just don't believe in the Suns. I put them in D for that reason, but I just think they're completely delusional. But I could make the same argument you made with the Lakers about like the Grizzlies being up there and then being pushed down and like
but the Suns were a 6 seed, so they could be like a 7 or 8 and then make it through the play-in. Like, I could see that
and with
happening.
The Clippers being worse, like they could be above the Clippers. For the sake of our show and us agreeing on this official what's in a game tier list, I'll keep the Suns in there because it really is like me being super low on Tyus Jones. And there are a lot of smart analysts, including Matt Moore, who love Tyus Jones. And
lots of smart analysts are wrong. So.
I'm just like against him because of that series, because he really made me angry. So we'll leave him in C. I had them in A, and then I moved them to D. So we'll meet in the middle at C.
The teams we have not talked about from mine are the Kings. Okay, so they were a play-in team last year, and everyone is mostly healthy. They had some end-of-season bumps and bruises with Kevin Huerter being out first, and then Malik Monk, I think, injured his shoulder. But they were in the play-in range even before those guys went out, so there was no like massive drop-off. Then they got DeMar DeRozan, traded Harrison Barnes for him. He should help them in the regular season some. Right? There were a lot of clutch games where it's like, oh, the offense is like super, not stagnant, but really sloppy right now. So they would like go on these big runs and then give up equally large runs and then end up in clutch games that they shouldn't really be in, frankly, but then lose in the clutch. And DeMar, I think he was second in clutch player of the year voting last year. So maybe he'd help with that. The Clippers and Warriors got worse. We talked about that, how that means that the Pacific Division overall is worse. And they play those teams the most of any teams in the NBA. So they're going to have more opportunities against teams that got worse this year. So they should at least be able to be a top 2 team in their division, because they always beat the Lakers anyway, right? Like there's this whole thing where like AD can't beat Sabonis. Why do you think a team that just traded for DeMar DeRozan is going to be worse than C tier?
That's what I think the Kings will be. Like they'll be in the play-in, and the only way they'll get in is if they're lucky. But I guess I don't know. I just don't know how good DeMar is going to make them or not. I kind of
That's
was
great.
like thinking
I
they're
know
a
how good
wash.
DeMar is, but you're right. I don't know how good he's going to make them.
Yeah. So
If
I was
that
just
makes
like,
sense. Yeah.
I'm still just kind of lower on the Kings. And like the Kings beat the Warriors in the 9-10 and then lost to the Pelicans for the 8
Yeah, because
seed.
they've been getting beat up in that matchup all year. They just can't handle any team that has real interior size, except the Nuggets, apparently, because they just get really lazy on defense whenever they play the Kings for some
Yeah.
reason. I just think
But
they're going to be a little bit better than they were last year, and it's more about like you said, you're paying attention to the number of playoff spots, but I'm more saying there's like a range, and there's like
a
a
lot of
number
teams
of
in a
teams
range. Yeah.
that are like fighting for those spots.
I'm just trying to fight against what I always say I hate with pundits who are like,
Sneaky good.
sneaky good. They could go on a run. They could
No.
make the playoffs. I'm trying to like choose against the team, and I'm trying to be like, look, the Pelicans and Kings do not have it, and I don't think they're gonna do it unless they get lucky.
Keegan Murray could also take another, leap. He's been really good defensively. They got a lot better defensively after Keon Ellis was starting in place of Kevin Huerter when he got injured. He might have a shooting regression season himself, Kevin Huerter. Like I don't see a lot of downside for this team.
I don't think I can accept the Lakers being D, but the Pelicans and Kings
Mm,
being C. I feel like those are like
yeah,
very similar. Like the Lakers
that's
finished higher
fair.
than both of them. And I think
The
the Lakers are
play-in,
better
yeah,
than both
but
of them.
regular season, whatever. The Pelicans did also make moves. We're about to talk about them in a second, but I'm gonna let you put the Kings in D, especially if they don't make the playoffs this year, because they have Sabonis locked up. They're probably going to extend Fox soon, and then they just signed DeMar as well. And they're just kind of like locked into like what they are at the moment, and with no indication of like where it is they're supposed to go, even though like everyone has ideas of maybe what they should do, but they just don't know. So they don't have enough information, right? They have
Yeah.
that one playoff series versus the Warriors last year in the last how many 21 years it's been? That I think I'm thinking more about the team expectation for this particular example, because it's like
Okay.
they went out and got DeMar DeRozan. So
Yeah.
they're the front office should expect this team to
I
make
think
the
that's true.
playoffs.
That's definitely true. And I was going more on like, I don't think they will
Right.
kind of a thing. But I could
Right.
be really wrong, and DeMar could really improve them, and they could be an 8 seed or 7
Yeah.
seed easily.
Or even 6. Like, you just never know with these Pacific Division teams because they play each
Ugh.
other so much.
Okay, I'll put them in C because I do think the DeMar thing.
I don't think I think you make a good argument though that they shouldn't be higher than the Lakers, because I think that the Lakers are the best team that I listed in D, and I don't think the Kings are better than them,
That's where it gets weird.
even though the Kings always beat them
Unless
head to head.
you could argue DeMar does make them better than the Lakers, though.
I think they're the same.
Okay.
All right, last team that I have in C is the Pelicans, and you had the Pelicans in D, is that right?
Yeah, it was essentially the same
Right.
kind of reasonings of the Kings. I mean, they like got smacked in the playoffs, and I was so fucking pissed at them.
Okay, so they're a weird ass team. I'm not here to argue that they are normal. I was actually thinking that you'd have me bump them up because they won 49 games last year. Again, like there's this like range of seeding where there's like 3 seeds and then like 6 teams fighting for those spots. And I kind of see the Pelicans as there. And for a time last season, they lost a couple of clutch games down the stretch, but any one of them would have bumped them up into being a top 4 seed and having home court in the first round. But they lost, and then they ended up like losing that momentum at the end, and then they just kind of stayed in that play-in range. They did lose the play-in game to the Lakers, but they were the 7 seed in that game. They had home court advantage, and they almost won that game before, at like in a crazy, like would have been a wild comeback, before Zion got injured in the last like
Mm-hmm.
3 minutes of that game. It was crazy. Like they had taken the lead after like a massive run by Zion. I think that my bottom line for this team is just like if this team is healthy, Zion first and foremost, I could actually see them as a team that could make the conference finals. Like I wouldn't be shocked by it. I wouldn't pick it because I think I have too many questions about their scheme and like how everything fits. But they have enough talent to do it. They just got DeJounte Murray. It is a DeJounte CJ backcourt though, which is like defensively. But maybe CJ starts coming off the bench more and they play Trey Murphy more in the starting lineup. Or maybe they miraculously find a trade for Brandon Ingram. But I just see a lot of defensive potential for this team. Herb Jones made them a top 5 defense last year. I don't know that losing Valanciunas helps him overall defensively, but I can see the arguments for it. Even though they get worse rebounding, they don't have to put like he won't be guarding any more pick and rolls, right? They can switch more things.
True.
They might give more run to Yves Missi, who I don't know, maybe he's a shot blocker. I don't know enough. He's a very athletic prospect, but he adds to more of their offensive questions for this team too. So it's just like they're a weird team, but they've had so much talent for so many years that you can't help but think, I mean, this is not a purgatory team.
If Zion is healthy, and I knew he was going to be available for the playoffs because he's never been that. That's what's so hard for me.
Well, they have to make the playoffs first. They actually did it this year. My thing is, I can't have the Pelicans lower than the Magic. I think they're similar. I think they're similar tier.
But they're in a different conference, which is why I'm more comfortable putting the Magic in C. I mean, the Lakers still beat the Pelicans in the play-in.
You are like obsessed with the Lakers, Will.
I know. I just like don't think the Pelicans are that good, and I know it's not that good of an argument, but I'm just like,
yeah. The other like argument against them is that they lost Najee Marshall, who was a really versatile defensive piece for them, and they traded away Dyson Daniels, who was another versatile defensive piece for them off the bench.
They're in this weird space right now, and they could figure it out this season, and then get out of this weird space.
Okay, so I'll just try one more thing. The Lakers wanted to get DeJounte Murray. Everyone was like, DeJounte Murray would solve all the Lakers' problems. They would finally have an athletic backcourt player who could play both sides of the ball. LeBron wouldn't have to worry about ball handling as much or having to play next to D'Lo, all of this stuff. However, the Pelicans got DeJounte Murray. And they had some of the similar issues, but they were just like lacking in shot creation overall. How does he play with the rest of those guys who all of them are better with the ball in their hands? CJ McCollum actually plays off ball quite well. You know, he'll move around. But the other guys, not so much. And maybe DeJounte, like if CJ starts coming off the bench, I could see their defense being better with DeJounte playing point than shooting guard next to CJ, all this stuff. And they were already a pretty good defense last year. They were top 5. They were actually the team that kept the Nuggets out of the top 5. We were pretty close to the Pelicans.
Well, right now we only have 6 teams in the A through C.
So we need a team.
I think we should pick one of the Kings and or Pelicans to go up in C, whoever you're higher on.
I'd pick the Pelicans because they beat the Kings and they're better.
All right, we'll put them up there then.
I think Zion is the best player of anyone on both of those teams. And that's kind of what it comes down to.
It's funny, like I think of the West as like from top to bottom so good, and now I'm like not seeing as many West teams in this like higher tiers. I don't know if it's because I really like the top 4 in the West.
It's because they're amazing.
But, well,
like I said, I could have been convinced to move the Pelicans up to upset potential, and the reason that I have that there is that I could see them getting like a top 4 seed. Like I can visualize that happening because it almost happened last year. And like the margins are so small in the West that there's just multiple teams fighting for so few spots.
Because like the Pelicans and Kings are likely to face each other in the play in like they were last year, I do want to put them in different tiers at least.
Well, we just got through 4.5 of our tiers. We'll talk more about D tier on the next installment, where we talk about some of the teams that aren't tanking, but maybe should be tanking. And the teams that are outright tanking because they want to capture the flag, the lottery hopefuls.
All right, hit the subscribe button and hit the like button on YouTube. And yeah, we love you in YouTube and in Serbia and the United States or whatever it is you're watching. And just remember, winning is fun and losing sucks.
unless you're tanking for flag.
Yeah, because then losing's fun.